Hi, welcome to Top Student Study Habits Day 5. Today is the last day of your Top Student Habits Challenge, and today we will still be looking at a habit that belongs to the learning habit. So watch out for it. Hi, welcome. Before that, let's always do what we usually start off with. We start off with a recap. On day 1 of this week, where we first met each other, we looked at A for aim for your goals. And that is when we had our end goal in mind, our big plan in mind. We want to know where we want to be at by the end of the year. So you are very clear that every step or every decision that you make each and every day should move you one step nearer to your end goals. And then on second day, letter B, we looked at behold the fruits of your successes. And that is where you visualize every day achieving your goals already, what it would feel like, what it would look like, how would you feel, what do you see, so that you will continue to align what is in your subconscious, in your unconscious mind, your values, and all to be aligned with your end goal. And so you have to visualize this daily. I hope you have been doing that until it becomes a habit to you. And then on day 3, we look at letter C, construct an action plan. And that is where we finally look at the end goals, break them down into smaller goals, and break them down into very small action plans on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis until your next exam, which would be the mid-year exams or the common test. So we've looked at this. You have a calendar now. By now, you would have plotted out all the small skills that you have to work on in order to see your grades jump by the next exam, right? So that's constructing an action plan. And yesterday was day 4. And day 4, we looked at diversifying your learning. So diversifying your learning is a learning habit. It is a habit that you should use when you learn something new or when you are learning a chapter. So we looked at diversifying your learning, especially so for topics or for chapters that you find very hard to learn, that you cannot seem to even encode the new information into your mind. This is one of the learning habits that you can use to learn better. So use this wisely, diversify your learning. And I hope that you have already tried it with one of the more difficult chapters and it will help you to remember things. So today, what will we be looking at? We are going to look at our 5th habit that you should use. And this 5th habit belongs to the learning habit category. So just to look at today's habit is letter E. Expect output from your study sessions. Now, I have a question for you today, and I would like you to take the next 10 seconds to answer me, okay? Did you read the newspapers this morning or yesterday? Now, if you did, what did you recall from reading it? Are you able to answer me? How much were you able to recall? Now, the key question that I have to ask you today is, are you studying like you are reading the newspapers? What do I mean? When people read newspapers, they generally read it very passively. That means they are not active in creating or constructing information as they read the newspapers. They do it when they read newspapers. They do it just to get the gist of that day's event. They look at the pictures. They want to get an understanding of whether there's any big news happening. What's the general feel like? Is it a negative day? Is it a positive day? Is there something that you can talk about it to make small talk, with your friends, your teachers, or your colleagues today? And that is how people read newspapers. My question is, do you study like you read the newspapers? So for students who read textbooks or when they study like they're reading the newspapers. I usually call them the textbook zombies. Because when you read the newspapers, you are reading to get the gist of information, a summary of information. But when you are studying, your objective is different. You are supposed to study to understand and to learn how to apply the concepts or to apply the information in different scenarios. So you cannot study like you are reading the newspapers. So my question today is then, what can we do? What habits can we apply when we're studying to make sure that we don't become textbook zombies? So let's look at step 1 to doing this. Step 1 is for each of your study sessions that you have set up in your calendar or in your work plan is to make sure that you set a deadline to each study session. Set a 50 minutes or 20 minutes timeline or deadline in order to finish up that study session. Why so? Elon Musk once said, if you give yourself 30 days to clean your home, you will take 30 days. But if you give yourself 3 hours to clean your home, it will take you 3 hours. And the same will apply to your study plan. I don't know if you remember the last time you had to rush an assignment and it has to be completed by the next day. No matter what, by hook or by crook, you manage to find time and squeeze out whatever you can to finish the assignment. Well, this is the same. When you are completing a study session, you have to plan in such a way that you know that within that study session, there is a deadline that you have to finish up your study session by the 50-minute timeline. How much must be done in that 50-minute time frame that you have given yourself. This is the way to make sure that you are on track in terms of your studies. So the biggest problem that students face is that when they start early in terms of exam prep, they always get the impression that there's always time. So they will take their own sweet time, perfect their notes, draw it in the most beautiful manner, waste a lot of time on the things that are excessive, that are not necessary, that are unnecessary. So what you have to do is always set a deadline to each task that you have set yourself. For example, if you've decided to study on to remember information from your current affairs set, then do so, right? So sometimes with the absence of deadlines and the lack of weighted assessments recently for students, we realize that students have lost their ability to plan because there's still no deadline. They decide to do things as they wish, choose to study what they like to study, choose to do a task that they prefer without any deadlines. Okay, so in order for you to be an efficient learner, remember step 1, set immediate deadlines to the task in your action plans. Okay, so now let's move on to step 2. Step 2 is on top of setting a deadline to each of your study session, you must also state an expected measurable output from each mini study session that you have. Otherwise, you will not remember anything from that 50-minute study session. Students like to study very passively, textbook zombies. They will read and then they will highlight. And after they close the book, 3 days later, when you are tested on the same information, you cannot remember anything. So don't be a textbook zombie. And how can you do that? Within that time frame, make sure that you have an expected, measurable output from the study session. So let me give you an example. So here's an example. If your plan was to study chemistry on, let's say, alkanes for the next hour, then before you begin your hour of studying, you would state on a piece of paper, stay focused. Today's learning outcome is this. I will be memorizing all the definitions for this chapter in alkanes, and at the end of this session, I will be able to complete 5 questions on this topic. Or at the end of this session, I will be able to memorize and write down all the definitions that is stated in this keyword list over here. That is how you state clear output. It must be expected out of you. You shouldn't be referring to the textbook. and it must be measurable. So from each study session that you have, you should leave the last 10 minutes for output. So the first, let's say 20 minutes is for input, for you to try and remember, try different ways to input into your memory. And then you got to close your textbook. Out of the study session, at the last 10 minutes, you will need to review. What does the review look like? It should be based on what you have set out. What is the expected measurable outcome of that study session? This will make sure that you will remember and that your brain has gone through the full loop of putting in information and allowing yourself to recall information. So the brain goes through the entire loop of learning, input and output. We're going to try this, okay? So here's an example of what we do with our students in our science classes. If you are doing the science program with us, then you should make use of your Quizlet apps, or you should make use of your learning recall apps over here. After class, each time you finish it, you should revise your textbook, the ones that we've given you when you sign up with us. And then after we finish the topic, use the Quizlet app to answer questions. It makes sure that the entire learning loop is covered, whether it's input of information and output, recall of information. All these are important things to check whether that study session has been effective or not. So this is a very important learning habit that you must learn. And so here are some examples of measurable outputs and measurable expected immediate outputs that you can create for all your study sessions. Use them. So I've got an on-the-spot challenge for you now. You would have seen that in today's notes, I have attached 2 sets of reading notes for you. I would like you to refer to our first set, Current Affairs Knowledge. This can be applicable for anyone from Sec 1 all the way to JC 2. As long as you can read, as long as you can understand, this should be very useful to you. So I prepared 2 sets. I would like you to refer to this set over here. Okay, so now you're at this set. I would like you to read this set for the next 15 minutes. I've put on a YouTube music accompaniment for you. You just need to spend the next 15 minutes reading this set that says First World Diseases. What exactly is First World Diseases? 15 minutes is up. I would like you now not to refer to your notes and not look at your notes and tell me everything you know about first world diseases. Right, so now, have you written down all these on paper or have you just briefly thought through? I want you to look at your paper and highly likely what you would remember would be the things that you read for the first 5 minutes and the things that you have read maybe for the last 3 minutes. That's the primacy and the recency effect. What you first read, you would remember it better. What you read just recently, you will also remember it better. Everything in the middle will seem like a blur. So that is what newspapers, the textbook zombies read. That's how they read, right? They will remember the beginning, they will remember the end, and everything else they will forget because they're only reading for the gist of it. There is no expected measurable output out of the reading. So you will realize that you cannot recall as much. All right, and now we are on task 2. Task 2 will require you to refer to my second set of current affairs notes that we usually give out to our English students. And today's topic and the topic that you should be reading now is called A Driverless Future. So with this task, what you need to do is to, as you are reading, I would expect you to actively think about this question because at the end of this task, you are expected to come up with to jot down all the points that will help you to answer this question here in the ACJC 2019 as a GP question. Consider the view that science solves all problems. Can science solve all problems? So I would require you to come up with some points after reading today's current affairs notes on a driverless future. Give yourself 15 minutes now to read again. Well, I don't have to give you the task right now because I guess you can predict what the task is. I would like you to pull out a piece of paper and try and recall what you have read and rearrange your points such that you can answer the question that I showed you just now from the ACJC paper, that science can solve all problems. So that will require you to produce some output, recall what you have read, and when you have done so, you will realize that you are highly likely able to remember more points from this set of notes than the first one, because prior to the task, you know that there's an expected measurable output out of you. Now, why did I ask you to complete that task? The two tasks just now, that was an experiment, and that experiment has been done in many societies with many students, and it has been proven over and over again that students who have the habit of stating an expected measurable output out of each study session seem to be able to remember and retain the information that they have learned, even though they've learned it long time ago. So some students says that they can only remember the information that they have learned if they study nearer to the exam. But what if there's so much to learn? Is that going to be effective for you? Will you be able to cram everything together, especially when you are feeling anxious, right? And that will not help you to achieve your full potential. So what can help you to remember, retain information longer, even though you start now, you start your study, you're studying for mid-year exams now, what can help you to retain it longer is such output, such methods, such habits, right? To expect from yourself a measurable output from each study session. So all these will ensure that you can move the information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So again, if you look at these two objectives that I have on the slide, by the end of my study session, I will finish reading first world diseases. This is the passive reading. This is the passive studying. It makes you a textbook zombie. But you can try the other method. By the end of my study session, I will be able to brainstorm points for this essay question. And so this one will require active recall, require you to rearrange points at the end of your study session. And this will help you move your information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So try this study habit all the time. Now let me help you and guide you step by step into preparing for the mid-year exams. I believe by yesterday's task, you would have already plotted in your calendar when you will study what, with more sessions given to studying the areas that you are weaker at. So the second thing that you have to do now is to, for each of these sessions, plot out what is the expected measurable output for each of these sessions. I can help you take a look and see whether what you have plotted is truly expected, is truly a measurable output, an immediate measurable output. All right. So I look forward to seeing your study schedule for the next week. Today's habit tracker requires you to state how long you will take to complete each of your study session next week. So if you look at your study plan for next week, let's get started. Plan how long will each study session be, set a timeline, a time frame, and then list the output required by the end of each of the study sessions that you have planned. So you shouldn't have generic things like read textbook page 1 to page 30. That is a passive reading. Don't be a textbook zombie. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that today's quote to end the session is, don't be a textbook zombie. Let's now put the past 5 days together. We've got the 3 different groups of habits. You've got motivation habits, and that tells you why you are working so hard, why you are planning so hard, why you should stick to the plan, because that will help you. Having the motivation habits every morning, every evening will help you keep your perspective right, help you to continue stay motivated to work hard. Then the second set of habit refers to your management habits, and that is where you talk about where you should study, when you should study, how you should study, and what you should be learning, the content that you should be learning. So all these things should be all in place in your calendar, broken up into small steps, so that you are walking one step by one step towards your end goals. And then finally, you will have your learning habits, and that is how you learn. You've got to start deciding to put in good habits of learning so that you can remember what you are learning now in the future. And so there's this whole set different habits in different categories, and we merely covered some of the key ones over here for the past 5 days. And trust me, just by implementing the 5 days, things will start moving. You are taking very quick steps towards your goals. And so, if you have enjoyed the past 5 days, I would like to invite you to our study habits workshop, your high performance habits workshop, where I will be working with you on areas to work on under these 3 different groups. There'll be more learning techniques that we can teach you, more habits that we can teach you. At the same time, one of the key things about habit is not about knowing what the habits are. It is also knowing how to maintain the habit, how to break bad habits. And these are things that we'll be covering in our 2 days workshop. So we look forward to seeing you there. These skills are important because these skills will take you through life. So, of course, in the study habits workshop, I hope that you have experienced a lot of the way we teach things in our classes, and these are things that you science research, study research that you can use when you are studying. And these research are also what we use to guide how we teach within our classes. And so, while you are designing your study plan and you realize that you do need external help, this March holidays, we've got a range of programs, whether it's the science camp program. We talk for secondary 1 students. We really get you started and help you understand the overview as well as how to study Sec 1 science, right? And this includes a 30-minute parent debrief session for parents who are also interested to learn how to journey along with your Sec 1 child in science. So we look forward to having you join us in this program over here. For our lower sec students, one of the areas that a lot of you struggle with is really literature. And so this March holidays, we want to get the foundation right so that you will not struggle with literature. You will enjoy it. You will know how to study it, what's the framework to studying it. And these are all things that will be covered in our Unseen Poetry workshop, where you learn how to look at poems, unseen poems, and learn how to dissect them, reorganize them, and write an essay, a literature analysis essay out of unseen poems. And if your school is doing lit books like Julius Caesar as well as Animal Farm, you should then also check out what we are doing this holidays for these 2 books. Enjoy, and we hope to see you at our centers for any of our trial classes as well.